Good morning. Wow.
You guys living that East Coast 10 a.m. in the morning.
Look at that shiplap.
Look at that 10:30 life. How's that sound? Can everybody hear me?
I hear you great.
Little echoey, but I think that's fine. Actually, talk right now. Maybe. Yeah, I don't.
Test.
It sounds like maybe the sound is coming through a different source. Because stand up and don't hold your mic near you.
Test.
Yeah, so it's recording it through your computer, I think, versus the mic.
I just had to restart everything because of my screen share. Might have jumped me off.
Shit.
That's fine. Where are
How's
you right
that sound, bro?
It sounds the exact same.
That's cherry, dude.
I mean, it sounds fine. It sounds fine. I mean, it's probably passable.
It sounds real good, man.
It's never perfect on this podcast. Let's be honest.
I have my echo cancellation on, which anything that's like a generic fix-all works every time.
Every time.
That's the spirit. I like it. How you doing? Where are you, Frida? You what's going on here? What is this whole? I'm on the East Coast. I have to record it. 10
Hold on. Let me do this. I got a chair. That's better. I'm in Connecticut. My wife is from. There's a family. Her aunt. What is it?
Sunshine State, I believe.
Sunshine State. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I would call it the lobster roll state, if you know what I mean, dude. Crushing those things. Boom.
A little lobster roll. It's an old working class food where you basically are eating like sea rats.
Yeah.
That somehow we turned into the most expensive food.
That is what lobsters are. They're sea rats.
I don't understand why we did it. I love lobster. Don't get me wrong, but
they're good.
Every time a lobster roll is presented to me on the menu, I'm like, I really could go for a lobster roll. $34.
Yeah.
No fucking way.
It's like thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, and all it is just lobster on buttered bread. Like I don't understand why it's so fucking expensive.
And it's not
ridiculous.
It's not cheaper here. Like you think it kind of should be like $12.
Yeah,
it's still like it's maybe like $24. You're like,
that's still a lot.
There's like a market price. It's like the diamond market. I talk about diamonds a lot on this pod and gold because I'm pretty heavy into those investments, but lobster's the same. Like the market fixes a price and they don't want to deviate. I don't think it's real, to be honest.
No, you're a gold, diamond, and lobster guy.
That's right.
You do.
That's what's on my charm necklace.
Gold, diamond, and lobster.
You talk a disproportionate amount about diamonds on this podcast for some reason. It's
all the time
on me that you bring it up almost as much as I bring up my fear of Chinese taking over everything and making us work harder than we already do.
I bought one diamond once and it was traumatic, let's say. So I'm still letting the gas out of that.
I hear you.
Were you one of those people? I feel like we may have had this conversation, and then we'll move on. Actually,
I got more reports from Connecticut. You'll be excited.
Well, this is really quickly before we talk more about the Sunshine State, Connecticut. This is Did You Reddit, a weekly podcast of the internet. By way of Reddit, the front page of the internet. My name today is "It's Your Jet Fuel Doesn't Melt Steel Beams."
Beautiful. I'm Dog Boobs. I didn't think of anything cool this morning.
And I'm My Free Bill Cosby Day.
Oh, no. Shit. I thought it was free bill. Like, free. We should have free bills these days. Like, bills suck.
No.
I mean,
it was
cool.
It was.
We said it
was the one day I could use that name.
That he was innocent. He was always innocent.
Dude.
Let Bill out. No, he's
not
innocent.
Bill
He's
out.
Shit. He has accusers out the dick. I think that the thing that he's getting out basically on a seemingly on a bit of a like litigious back door where he had provided information in a civil suit in 2005 or something. And then like, what, we found this thing. You actually shouldn't have imprisoned him, and the court's like, fuck. Right,
yeah, so
you're gonna
this is like
days. Who fucking cares?
Classic Law and Order, you guys. Sam Waterston This is a real moment. So basically, like a few days before the statute of limitations was up for Bill Cosby on this particular sexual assault, because I think his statute of limitations was up on most of the rest of them, and this was like the one they could nail him on.
And so if you statute of limitations is 10 years or something like that, how's that
something work? Ridiculous, like 12 years, 10 years, something like that. And it was a few days like right before that was going to be up that the DA charged him with the crime. So he basically, one of the strongest pieces of evidence that put him in prison was his testimony at the civil suit years ago, where the district attorney at that time had told him, hey, if you testify and tell us all this shit, we promise we will never charge you for this crime. We promise. So he spilled his beans, and there was a lot of incriminating stuff in what he said. Then that old DA
was that case. Sorry, in that case, that was for an accuser, so he theoretically or hypothetically paid that accuser out just money, right? To settle that.
I don't really know.
He sort of had to admit to it.
Yeah.
But in exchange for probably a payment. So
probably, because
he was in his mind, he was doing the math like, look, it's not jail time, it's just money. Yeah. I got a ton of money. Who gives a ass?
Right.
So that was the deal he made with his attorneys were like, this is a good deal. Just take it.
So then that DA retires or whatever, gets blasted off into space. There's a new DA. That DA is like, fuck that old deal. I'm using that testimony and I'm putting him away for sexual assault and rape and all this stuff. So when you look at it like that, I kind of get why they had to turn over the conviction, which sucks. It sucks. But then in my Law and Order brain, I was like, what if this DA was like, listen, guys, I know we only got a couple hours to charge this motherfucker. And, we know this is going to get turned over on appeal. Whatever. Do we want to put him in prison for 3 years or however much time it takes for that to go through the appeal system? Or do we want to just let him get away with it altogether?
And maybe he'll die. Or maybe they thought like, look, and we know we're kind of breaking the rules, but maybe he'll just die in prison.
Maybe he'll just die. Which is like I love when the law takes the law into their own hands like that.
I'm a little bit up in, obviously he's like a total creep, rapist, and a bad dude, but the legal system, took a pretty big leap of faith in trying to like fuck him over, which I don't think is a good thing for anybody. Like if they're fucking over him, which he's a scumbag, like that means they're hypothetically fucking over like kids or other people or like pulling moves. So in a way, I like that like the move didn't work.
Yeah.
Brendan Ducey. Was that the guy's name?
Oh yeah.
Oh, the Duke, the Duke prosecutor.
No, who's the sweet boy in Making a Murderer that got
Brendan.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, if you just say that you murdered this guy, we will give you a candy bar.
Yeah. So in a way, I like that the judge like stepped in, was like, this isn't how it works. Like this doesn't. So unfortunately, it was for the worst rapist in town.
Yeah.
So that sucks. But it's like I have faith and not faith in the justice system about it, I guess, at the same time.
Yeah. I'm with you. I like when I heard it, I was like, what the fuck? He's out? Like that's so unexpected. And then when you read the details about like how there was this deal in place and he only testified because he was told by the DA that he would never get charged for something. Like, I'm not saying like I think he should, I don't know. I'm not saying like people should always like tell Bill Cosby the truth, but people should always tell everyone the truth in the legal system. So it's like I kind of get why it happened. And if they knew it was going to happen, which if I were a lawyer and I saw this situation, I'd be like, duh, this is going to get turned over on appeal,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe he was being sassy and he was like, I know it's going to get turned over on appeal, but I want to put this motherfucker in prison for a little bit.
I also, generally speaking, don't love the idea of people dying in prison. Like I just it's so sad and so depressing that I like even the like worst of the worst. I'm kind of like let them out for like at least a couple days to just like get a taste of the world that they lived in the fucking concrete cell. So like I mean, Bill Cosby, you can't go anywhere again for the rest of his life without getting harassed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at least O.J. Simpson has like a bar that he goes to now, and he's just like,
he's like the most popular guy in that bar.
Yeah, he basically has like we could probably buy a cameo right now from O.J. Simpson just telling us he did it, right? And so Bill Cosby, burn in hell. I hope somebody fucking throws shit and it lands squarely on your face,
in your mouth,
yeah, but I don't like the idea of people dying in prison. It makes me really fucking sad, and it just feels like very like existentially devastating.
Yeah.
So
I hear you.
Bill, did you see his? I mean, there's a picture of him like leaving court with his head held high, even though he can't see, and he's like, it looks like he's peacocking pretty hard. Like, see, motherfuckers, like the cause always wins in the end. And it's like,
God,
his ego seems so massive and so like godlike in his own head. Yeah, and this is just like a reinforcement of his power in his head, and he's just like sort of, he's so satisfied right now. He's like, see, I never fucking admitted anything. I never like bent over. Fuck all you, and look at me, I won. And he like, he did it. You're like, fuck, man, the cause won. Squeaked out of this. It's pretty crazy.
Fucking blows.
He's got the. Oh yeah, Jesus Christ! All right, I'm gonna pull this up. I mean,
trigger warning.
Trigger warning. I mean, it's also one of those things where you're kind of like,
oh God.
Sometimes you see things like this, and it's like one of those like, he said, she said, he said, she said, she said, whatever. There were like 40 people that accused him of this. Like he definitely did it. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
I think it's
like usually when you see a photo like this,
60 plus people, which is
usually when you see a photo like this, you're like, the person's like,
that's like a Nelson Mandela photo.
Yeah. Like I'd been railroaded and I was put in prison for 20 years for a murder I didn't commit.
I was in a South African prison.
For apartheid, protest. No, Bill Cosby just raped 60 other women, got caught for it, and no longer gets to be America's dad.
And he's holding up his rape fingers like, look at that. Got it. He was a real...
I love pointing out too, by the way, that this
good point.
This publication, VOA Mag or some bullshit. Bill Cosby flashes a V sign. That's not a V.
It's a peace sign.
It's a peace sign, you fucking idiots. Who wrote this article?
V for victory? I mean, this must be an English, no? Is it an English thing?
I don't know.
Like an English website? No, US probably
News,
not.
Press Freedom, VOA News on Iran. What is this publication?
I don't know, man.
Their only sections are U.S. News, Press Freedom, VOA News on Iran, and then COVID-19 pandemic.
What the fuck?
There's something about being overly educated in the world. Like a lot of journalists have only spent time at like very fancy colleges probably, and they're like, I don't even know what a peace sign is. Like, do you know what a high five is, dude? Like, do you know? Like,
it was probably a little Gen Zer that was like, I don't know, man. I've never seen this before.
What is this?
I mean, TikTok, we always do this. I mean, I don't know. I'm a fucking baby boomer now.
What do you always wear? You always wear in our hearts.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, so today, it's been interesting. This has been a lot of oh man, Brotherhood of the Crows. Oh, these are my my crow boys. I love it.
Fuck yeah.
We so there's been a lot of news since we last pod, evidently. It's insane the amount of shit that's happened. So last week, between the time we last broadcasted and right now, our Lord and Savior John McAfee died. Which is insane, which is so sad because he was the fucking guy. Also not that sad, he's kind of a piece of shit too, but he was like a fun piece of shit where he
maybe underage angels in heaven poop in his mouth until the end of eternity.
Exactly.
He loved it. He loved that.
I will never forget that part of that documentary when I was probably on my laptop doing something else, and like was halfway looking at the screen and sort of caught the tail end of one of the girls in Spanish going like, yes, he had us sit on the hammock and cut a hole in it, and I would sit underneath. He would sit underneath, and we would poop on his face.
Yes.
I was like, what? Really? Come again?
What?
And then I had to like rewind it like 30 times to make sure I'm getting this right, because I'm a bad reader and I have a terrible retention for information. And I'm like, before I go out on the town telling people this is what John McAfee was into, I need to make sure I got it straight. And sure enough, I got it straight.
God
and
damn it.
What a cool fetish. That's what I say.
I mean, what a cool fetish.
he was
That's the coolest fetish ever, right?
He was a guy.
So cool.
So from now on, for the rest of this episode will be referred to as Did You Reddit, a weekly podcast about the internet by way of the front page of the internet memorial podcast for John McAfee. The John McAfee Memorial Did You Reddit Structural Engineering Podcast is the official name.
We're setting up a scholarship.
Yep.
It's going to be amazing. What was that amazing post you found? I think, was it Freed? You found like a LinkedIn thread of a bunch of like bros. Was it you, or was it It's Your Jet Fuel Doesn't Melt Steel Beams? Felt a LinkedIn thread of someone being like, our fucking hero, John McAfee, Lord of the Bitcoin, like passed away. And that was a real American man. Men aren't masculine anymore. Men are little baby bitches. And I'm like, this is on LinkedIn. Like, you're talking to your coworkers and your like networking circle about this. And everyone was like, fuck yeah, rest in power, Prince. And I'm like, what the fuck? Weird.
People, man. People are the fucking worst.
They're the worst.
It's interesting. I've seen some like slight shreds of culture wars creeping into LinkedIn posts.
Shit.
Like it's becoming a little bit more normal to it becoming more Facebookatized.
Yeah.
Right.
Because man, if I'm LinkedIn, I gotta be worried about that. Being like, no, we've been like straight for a long time. Let's keep it that way. Like it's all about what is it? Your neck size is your net worth.
Yep. Neck width. Neck worth.
Neck width is your net worth.
Net worth. Exactly.
Also,
how is that not a t-shirt? I don't.
It's gonna be if I ever get my ass in gear.
We got another email from our t-shirt vendor asking why we haven't done any yet.
God damn it.
We're gonna have to do that at some point.
We're on it.
Also, shout out a friend, a new friend of the pod. I don't remember what her name was, but somebody hit us up on Instagram basically being like, yo, I've only just started listening to you guys, but I like what you're doing. I don't know what you're talking about because I have not heard this inside joke yet. And it dawned on me that like the compounding inside jokes that have happened over the last 191 episodes is such a mountain to climb that I don't know how anybody could possibly start listening to this podcast without knowing some of those inside jokes and getting any of what we're talking about.
No.
So
that's a good point. We should do an episode.
In hell. Yeah.
We should do an episode of like recapping and getting new listeners up to speed on some of the bullshit we talk about.
Yeah. It's probably a good idea. I mean, we are fastly approaching episode 200, so I think that
might be a good idea.
A good episode.
That would be a good episode to come back to the studio. Do you think?
Yeah.
It gives us like a little bit of a window. Probably sooner than that, but
yeah, I was gonna say we have like basically 2 months before we're at that point, so I'd like to go earlier if possible. But
it sounded so fast in my head. I was like, look, it's only count to 10. 1, 2, and we're there. And it's like
we're there. With the soundboard.
Exactly.
I miss it.
I like your pony.
Anyway,
all right. So the news. So John McAfee died. Donald Rumsfeld died, which we're just gonna gloss over that one. We don't fucking care. But he started the Iraq War.
Remy.
Started the Iraq War. He was played by Steve Carell in that movie about the war. Vice, I think, was what it was called, or whatever.
Steve Carell, quietly the most range of all time. Like,
yeah, man.
That guy is the greatest.
It's crazy.
So true.
What else happened? The
Britney, Free Britney. There was the conservatorship hearing.
Huge Free Britney thing going on right now.
Some amazing memes going around about everybody asking to free Britney instead we freed Bill.
I know.
It's like so.
I haven't seen this yet.
Oh, I've just seen 100 from. I mean, they're definitely.
I love
it's,
the idea.
It's some version of that.
Yeah.
People praying to Jesus to free Britney, and then Jesus like going, I'm gonna free Bill instead. And like you're like, that's kind of what happened.
Yeah. Just like starting just like free like B word, and Jesus goes, say
Bill
no more.
Cosby.
Say no more. I know what you guys are asking.
You're asking. Yeah.
I'm very busy. I'm gonna just cut this short. I'm gonna go off the B and just keep rolling with it.
Listen, based on what I know about you people, I know exactly what you want. We're freeing Bill.
Free, but say no more. I got you.
Say no more. I got this. I think the Free Britney stuff's pretty big. All that stuff's gonna come to a head soon.
Dog Boobs, can you like recap that like in 3 minutes?
Dude.
Are you like?
I'll do a quick recap. So Free Britney's been a thing for a while. Ever since she went crazy, shaved her head, and hit a paparazzo with an umbrella back in the early 2010s or early 2000s. She has been placed under conservatorship by controlled by her father, Jamie Spears. And
he seems a little bit like a Southern dandy.
A little bit of a Southern dandy. A little bit of a Southern. I'm not quite sure
what that means, but I think I do.
He's a Southern dandy and a Southern dumbass. Yeah. Yeah. So with Britney Spears, she finally testified like in open court about the conservatorship and said she's been, for years abused by the family. Like she is perfectly capable of running her own life. She's like,
not abused though, right? We're
not
like
financial, emotional abuse for sure. And then one detail that came out that was very disturbing that a lot of people kind of glommed onto was that she wants to have more children. She's a fucking 30-something-year-old woman. She's got to be almost. No, she's got to be almost 40. How old is Britney? 39.
That's fucking.
I thought she was older. I know. So
I could have sworn she was in her 50s.
Right, no, she's 39.
We've known it. We've been following Britney Spears' life
her whole life
since I was in 7th grade.
That's wild to think she's not that much older than us.
I want to say her and I are the same age. I'm a couple years older than you guys both, and the reason I think that is because I remember when her first video came out, I was like also 17 or something, and I was like, "How old's this girl?" And people are like 17. I'm like, "Wait, I'm 17."
You're like, "Wait a minute."
Like, this, like I'm popping zits all over the place, and this girl's like chilling with a boa constrictor, like, in a rock and roll video, and then I also thought, I was like, well, we're the same age, so like theoretically we could get together.
Yeah,
probably.
duh.
You still can.
We still can, actually, more than ever.
More than ever, in fact.
Legally more than ever, actually, technically.
My buddy Dom, he dates Britney Spears. It's
weird, but he
they're
does.
both 63 now.
Hey, you know that guy we do that podcast about? He used to live on that boat and stuff. Yeah, he's dating Britney Spears.
Dating Britney Spears now that she doesn't have any money anymore, but he's dating her, all right. So she wants to have some more kids with her current fiance, which a 39-year-old woman should have every right to do. And she told open court that she has been forced to have an IUD implanted in her body that she does not want in her body, which is like, that's like fucking crazy.
That is crazy.
Everybody's like
fantasize. I think our audience is really drawing the connection right now between the perfect match of Frida and Britney Spears.
I know.
You can just imagine again. It's just like
she's got some kids. I've got some kids and a wife. We could all get together and just do it all in the South.
Exactly.
So you, Kevin Federline, your wife, your kids, and you and Britney Spears somewhere in there. All move to a small town about 20 miles outside of Orlando.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful life.
We raise gators.
Yeah.
And we just lean into our haircuts,
Yeah.
We just don't let anybody try to style it otherwise.
Good.
All your kids internships at the local gas station.
And then what nobody saw coming is that they're going to start their own kid band called Aggressive Alligators, and we're going to then turn them into childhood servants and milk
pop servants.
That's right, pop servants, baby.
Nice.
Pop servants.
Pop servants is the new kid band. Wow. Yes.
Pop servants.
You guys
missing any details in the Britney Spears?
I mean, I think there's going to be another hearing. So keep an eye out, you guys. More information coming. Free Britney. Throw up those V signs. We want Britney free, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, is that what that's what that means, right? Okay.
Just the letter V.
V for Britney.
V for Britney, y'all.
Free Britney. V for Britney.
V for Britney, y'all. Cool.
Y'all.
Stupid joke that no one will understand. And
nobody cares.
That.
Good listening to understand. Zach asks, want to know a nickname of the element of truth.
Zachariah Zane Ziedler, tell us.
Like this could be
feels like a dick joke.
But,
what's the name of the element of truth?
I don't know. It seems like this person could be trying to promote their own Twitch channel. Anyway,
you better tell us.
Yeah, we're gonna have to see. So the other thing that happened, which is going to be the biggest chunk of what we're talking about today, is of course, and I don't. This isn't really room for jokes. We can joke about the Bill Cosby, Britney, like free them shenanigans.
Arguably, it's not funny either. It's both sad and twisted. But
nice. Okay.
So it looks like the answer is Veritasium for everybody who's keeping score at home.
Well, see, I just Googled Veritasium, and an Australian filmmaker named Derek Muller just came up.
Oh,
I see.
So
listen. The rabbit hole.
They're leading us into a rabbit hole, and we're gonna go there, but after this.
Well, if your movie sucks, though, we're gonna make fun of it. So you're risking a lot.
No jokes. Is the Miami building collapse, and that was like a big thing. And the reason that is so interesting, well, there's a lot of reasons why it's interesting. It obviously is extremely tragic, and it is also shrouded in mystery, but some of it is a little bit of conspiracy, but it's kind of like practical conspiracy, in my opinion, where it's a little less like, oh yeah, like, you know, it's because Epstein had his files there and they had to blow it up before it went to court.
Right.
It's a little bit more like shady deals have been going on for a long time in a place like Miami, and this is a byproduct of infrastructure collapse. And because of all those shady deals and because of some ignored paperwork and all that kind of stuff, now we have a lot of people that have perished and a lot of people that have lost their homes and everything. And so we wanted to talk about it because I think it's kind of one of those things that is an interesting cross section of all of the best parts of Reddit, in my opinion, where there's a lot of information to be gleaned from what actually happened and some of people speculating about some of the reasons why it happened in real, not some of the conspiracy, but also some of the bigger questions about what this ultimately means. So today we're talking about structural engineering, right? The John McAfee Memorial Structural Engineering Podcast from DigiReddit.
Yes.
But we're going to be talking about that. And we're going to be talking a little bit about what happened in the Miami apartment collapse and some of where the chatter is happening on Reddit specifically. And I think as I was going through the structural engineering Reddit subreddit last night, I also I guess we're going to get into this more, but it's interesting seeing the pride that structural engineers seem to take in their craft, and they it's almost as if they treat it like the doctor takes what do they call that, the
Hippocratic oath.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like the structural engineers kind of feel similar about themselves, and they handle it very similarly, which they're like, it is our responsibility to make society function in a way that is like reliable, structurally sound, physically stable. We're the bedrock of societal growth. And so they take this shit really seriously. So which is very interesting to me because I've never actually thought about it that way. And
it's such a fundamental role in like society that we don't think about daily. At all.
And it's like, it's interesting because even like, I mean, Frida, I know you've built a lot of stuff, right? And so like a lot of like the like load bearing beams and shit like that you kind of know the principles of that kind of stuff, but I guess you kind of forget that it is like all of society is built on like centuries and centuries and millennia of people building ways for people to stay safe and dry and warm.
Yeah.
And, and live.
Shelter.
Right?
Yeah.
Shelter is one of our needs. Like it's food, water, and shelter, right? Isn't that those are the three basic needs, right?
Yeah, and boning.
Oh yeah, it's of course it's food, water, shelter, and bone zone.
Yeah, and taking it to Pound Town. But also, I do think that when you look at how much more complex structures have become in the past 100 years.
All right, Dog Boobs, I'm kind of the bro on this show.
I'm sorry.
Encroaching in my sort of zone there.
Listen, man, you're gonna just have to out-bro me if you want to be the bro here, okay?
It's kind of my shtick. Boning.
I'm a bone.
We have a territorial conflict happening right now on the podcast.
It happens with bros.
Dog Boobs is really trying to take over the role, and I mean, without your irrelevant bro comments, Fried, you're gonna be.
Who am I? What am I doing?
You're gonna get step up. Kicked out the door, dude.
You gotta step up, man.
All right. I'm now the empathetic one. I've shifted gears.
I mean, he's very sensitive. But you look at the kind of structures that exist nowadays, and especially the Miami, the Surfside condominium in Miami was a 40-year-old building, and buildings in the United States in general aren't super old. I remember in general being in Europe and stuff and just being struck at how old everything is. And then you come back to Los Angeles, for instance, especially West Coast stuff. It's a little different more in the East Coast, but West Coast, just all these squat, flat, little ugly buildings. And you're just damn, there's no history here. But you look at the way that structures have become more complex, especially in the last 50 years, and reading through this subreddit, I'm it's really amazing that more buildings don't collapse. I'm now that I've read all this stuff, we read through the report, which we'll get into. I'm looking around is concrete falling off? Do I see water dripping from the top of my garage? It's freaking scary. There's so much that goes into the safety of buildings that hold hundreds and thousands of people sometimes that we don't even think about daily.
Well,
it's a good point.
And Fried, you may have gone through a similar thing. I don't think you didn't buy your house remodeled, right? You've been remodeling it. You kind of bought a normal house and you've done it on your own, right?
Yeah, we bought a house that was built in 1948. It was pretty much untouched. It was very well sort of kept up, but it was unfettered or untouched. Right. And then we gutted it and remodeled it. And so in that process, we definitely the codes had to basically leap from, I think somebody had done something in the 70s, because there's permit records of all this stuff. It's actually really interesting. You can look back and say, oh, in 1974, this guy added this bathroom, and you go, oh, cool. And there's the plans of it, and you go, this is how they did it.
Yeah.
And the codes have changed from then till now. So anytime you do something new, everything you do new has to come up to the current code. Right. That's why it can be very expensive to do things by the book, per the code, because, what the inspector will say is you have to upgrade all the electrical in the house and all the plumbing to the current code standard.
I just wanted to add a socket for my toaster.
Exactly. And it's never a bad investment because it's better technology. It's safer. It's going to improve the value of your home and all that stuff. But yeah, we did all that stuff and it was interesting. They definitely, the house now, I would say, is very strong. It's a 1-story building, so it's not going to necessarily fall over, but now they added all this other strength within it, and you're like, oh shit, now it feels like it's this robust thing, even though it's a tiny little house. But
that's awesome.
Our home, the home my girlfriend bought that we live in now, that I record from, obviously, kind of the exact opposite story, right? So we bought a
nice
home, right? Yeah, we bought a flipped home, or she bought a flipped home rather, and every single time that we have to get something fixed, the contractors come over and they go, the fuck happened here? Right?
Oh, God.
They didn't do this. They didn't do this. Who fucking did your house? And we're just
I don't know. We fucking bought it.
Well, do you have an example of that?
Well,
like,
I have an
I'm
example.
curious for my own.
I don't know how to exactly explain, but this is one of those. This is something that maybe you would understand that I don't really understand. But
Yeah, that's why
I'm
not trying to challenge your authority.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you have a flipped home. Name.
I'm curious.
One error the contractor made.
No, I like talking about this stuff, so I'm just curious about it.
So our roof was leaking when every once in a while in LA, very rarely, if it rains, and people just freak out and nobody can drive and it's fucking pure bliss.
People fall over in the street and drown in a small puddle. It's scary here. It's scary.
But when it was raining, we were getting leaks in our roof, and we were like, "What the fuck is going on?"
What kind of roof is it?
There.
Is it asphalt shingles?
I think so. Yeah. And so
pitched roof, right? It's pitched.
Yeah, pitched roof. Yeah,
it's not a flat. Yeah.
No, it's pitched. Yeah, and so we had a roofer come and check it out, and he was just like, "Oh, well, this is your problem." And then there's like a little saucer around each of the little, like, they look like tiny chimneys on the roof. I don't know what they're called.
They're vents. They're vents for your plumbing. Yeah.
Right. And so,
like when hey, dog boobs, you'll know about this. When you're carving a beer, when you're shotgunning a beer, right? After you burn.
Yeah.
You need to let the air out somewhere. So when you flush your toilet or you turn on your sink, the water pushes, but you need an air suck. And so these vents go out the top to basically breathe.
So fart vents.
They're fart vents for your plumbing. Yeah.
Basically. Got it.
So all of those, there's a little saucer around each of those to prevent leaking that they just did not put on. They just categorically were just like,
it's like a neck. It's like a neck. Yeah.
And so the roofer came and was just like, "Oh, this is an easy fix. I basically just have to like put stuff around it." And we were just like, "Why didn't they do that before?" And he was just like, "This is what every single flipped home does this shit, where they just they
cut corners.
They cut corners wherever they possibly can.
Maximize the profit.
It saves such little money, but it fucking costs so much money in the end to fix because there's so many little things.
It's so stupid.
Like, yeah, it's so bizarre. And there's a million of those little things in this house that like we've just discovered over time. There'll be like an electrical thing, and there'll be like a weird vent, and then there'll be like and there's other things too where my girlfriend just redid our back area. There's like a pool, like an old pool, and there's a back area around it, and I know. And we had to completely redo the concrete, and then they were like, "Oh, you don't have any drainage here. Like you need to like add drainage." And we were just like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "There's nowhere where the water goes. That's why the water always pools."
Oh shit.
And this is kind of a Florida story of what we're going to talk about. Is like the concrete wasn't draining the water away from the building properly, so things were pooling, and anytime like water pools next to concrete, it's just sort of starts to break it down.
And that's something we learned from the subreddit, is that water is like the most damaging corrosive material to concrete and to like buildings in general, that if there isn't like proper drainage, it's gonna fuck it up.
It's like we need it to live, but it could also kill us. It's crazy.
Oh,
it's crazy. It's fucking crazy.
If you got them, dude. All right. So,
but it's true. But the only upside of that we live in the driest fucking place ever.
True.
And like when it rains, it basically gets so dry for so long, like it's a slow deterioration process.
Right. Well, it's also it rains, and then you're just like, oh, thank God, and then like it's completely dried up like 15 minutes later.
Right.
Like every time this happens, because for anybody who doesn't live in LA or in California for that matter, particularly Southern California, when it rains, it's fucking beautiful out. Everything is suddenly green, and you're just like, oh my God, I didn't know there was so much beautiful, lush green everywhere. And then like the next morning, it's back to just like a pile of like totally flammable
dry brush.
You know what it looks like? I don't know if you guys ever get down to Singapore much, but I'm there pretty much every other quarter. But it looks like Singapore for like a week after it rains in LA, and it's really gorgeous, and then it doesn't get gorgeous anymore.
Yeah,
gets shitty looking.
God damn it.
Okay, so let's pull up the sub and let's talk about structural engineering. And the reason we're using structural engineering, I mean, because this was such a big event. Obviously, there's a lot of subs that are talking about it in one way or another. You're going to find it on Conspiracy, of course. You're going to find it on fucking other places. Probably, fucking Structural Engineering Gone Wild probably has some good stuff there. posting nudes and structural engineering in drafts of blue paper. I don't know what you would call that. But structural
Drafting
engineering
paper.
is like drafting paper. There you go.
There you go.
Of blue paper. But structural engineering talks about the science of this stuff, and I think through the lens of what actually went wrong, which I think is really helpful. So let me pull up my can.
While you're pulling it up, and you sort of said this earlier, but yeah, man, these guys and ladies and whoever are so passionate about like getting the details correct and the math and the formulas and explaining them in a way on this Reddit. You're like, wow, like this is like a legitimate place to figure out what happened if you were into figuring out how engineering works. It's pretty crazy.
Very crazy.
I was impressed.
Yes, I agree. So let's get into it. So starting with the subreddit alone. So this is the thing that I found really beautiful and compelling here, right? So reading the side, I will actually, Dog, do you want to read this? Because I can't read.
Yeah. So I'm gonna have to read it from your screen because all of my Reddit tabs are saying "ow," Reddit.com. Okay, so I'm an engineer. This is written on the side of the subreddit. I'm an engineer. In my profession, I take deep pride. To it, I owe solemn obligation. Since the Stone Age, human progress has been spurred by the engineering genius. Engineers have made usable nature's vast resources of material and energy for humanity's benefit. Engineers have vitalized and turned to practical use the principles of science and the means of technology. Were it not for this heritage of accumulated experience, my efforts would be feeble. As an engineer, I pledge to practice integrity and fair dealing, tolerance and respect, and to uphold devotion to the standards and the dignity of my profession, conscious always that my skill carries with it the obligation to serve humanity by making the best use of Earth's precious wealth. As an engineer, I shall participate in none but honest enterprises. When needed, my skill and knowledge shall be given without reservation for the public good. In the performance of duty and in fidelity to my profession, I shall give the utmost. I see what you mean about like very similar to the Hippocratic Oath. It's like, this is a big responsibility, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can all agree this person's a fucking nerd, and I want to beat him up. But yeah, I mean, I also found.
Thank God for nerds too, right?
I know.
Seriously.
There's another one. So on the NSPE.org, so the National Society of Professional Engineers, which I can only assume is a legitimate source for this kind of stuff. There's on their ethics code of ethics page. There's another thing called the Engineer's Creed, right? So as a professional engineer, I dedicate my professional knowledge and skill to the advancement and betterment of human welfare. I pledge to participate in utmost of performance, to participate in none but honest enterprise, to live and work according to the laws of man in the highest standards of professional conduct, to place service before profit, the honor and standing of the profession before personal advantage, and the public welfare above all other consideration. In humility with the need for divine guidance, I make this pledge. So adopted by the National Society of Professional Engineers, June 1954. So this is, I feel like engineering and engineers, it's kind of, if in a way it feels like a deeply underappreciated profession. It almost reminds me of like a nurse, right? Like we think of being like, oh, lawyers and doctors, man, those are the fucking ones, man. They're making the money. Like lawyers don't give a fuck. They're unethical pieces of shit, right? And then like doctors, honestly, I've met some doctors who are also unethical pieces of shit. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that you see this from the engineer's perspective, and it feels like it is a I'm sure there are bad engineers too, but there's an interesting
the guy that built your roof.
Yeah, well, there's an interesting stress, it feels, to like the idea of being an engineer where you kind of go, if I don't do this right, someone could get really, really hurt later, and everything that they've worked for gets destroyed, right? And it feels like just profit is just kind of not as much as that thing. So it was interesting seeing this because I've never contextualized engineers this way, and I think that it is like it makes something like what just happened in Miami like even more damning because there's an element of there's an element of like Miami shenanigans, you know, because you think about the reputation of like Miami, where it's just like built on cocaine trade and kind of,
Right.
you know, a lot of like bad fucking like people from New York going down there and fucking trying to, you know, like it's the last stop in the U.S. before they send all their money to the Cayman Islands to sit and, you know, and because of that, you kind of look at this building and you're like, oh man, like it feels like that was the equivalent, the like engineer's creed gone awry, you know? So I thought that was quite interesting. All right, so getting into some of the posts, and Dog, I know that you've been kind of leading the pursuit of this one. So where do you want to start in terms of like, talking about this?
Well, you're a builder yourself.
I am a bit of a Sims builder, you guys.
Hey, listen, don't put Sims in front of it. You are.
I'm a builder.
You could probably learn everything you need to know engineering wise from Sims. Like, are you actually picking up good habits on there, or do they not like?
This is where we fall apart on The Sims, and this is why I need a contractor. Or you know, this is why.
Weight-bearing beams? Is that what you're about to tell us? Right?
This is the problem. See, this is why I need a structural engineer in my Sims game. If I were ever to take my Sims mansion into the real world, you could make a gigantic 5-story, completely empty shell of a building, and your Sims will flourish in it. You just have absolutely no responsibility to include any sort of infrastructure or load-bearing shear walls or anything like that. So no, I don't know shit about structural engineering, which is why this was really interesting.
If they adjusted that game to be structurally like correct, where
you teach people so much.
I mean, man, can you imagine how many people would just learn everything they need to know while playing a game? It's like, no, you can't build a 400-story building with no foundation. You're like, why not? Looks cool. Looks sick.
I'm going to do the cheat code so I can.
Yeah.
Which maybe you do.
Hey, Dog Boops. I don't know if you want to be a bajillionaire, but maybe, you know, you make that game.
Maybe.
You're a bit of a gamer.
Maybe you do. Maybe you do. I bet it exists for people who want to be engineers.
So, like, as you're building this home in The Sims, like, you have to pay attention to, like, electrical code.
Right? You know? Like, there's some stuff. Like, this isn't
It would be a cool game to give my kid. First cool game ever, dude, instead of fucking Fart Wagon or whatever they're playing. Idiots, dude.
Hey, listen,
idiots.
Start with Fart Wagon, end with The Sims. What I like to say.
Booger and Fart Wagon for the kids.
We often say.
Yep.
Here's another. Before we advance, because we are kind of talking about the knowledge sharing. This is another site that we had found that I think, or I don't. Did you find this? Did I find this? I don't know how this happened, but there's a site called structuralengineeringbasics.com, which I thought was kind of interesting. And this is another, like, when we talk about learning this stuff, because it is also intimidating, right? I have tried multiple times in my head to be like, how do I build a fill in the blank thing?
Yeah.
And I always start with like, cool, I got to buy some 4x4 or some, like, you know, and they gotta do
a nail, 3 nails, and a hammer.
Yeah. And I just start getting overwhelmed, and I have a hard time like wrapping my head around what to do.
Yeah.
And so this site, structuralengineeringbasics.com, master the fundamentals of structural engineering without any technical knowledge or paying thousands of dollars. Advance your skills and career with 80 on-demand videos you can watch whenever it fits your schedule. I don't know how. So this course shortcuts your way to mastering the basics of structural engineering, whether you're an architect, a contractor or project manager, a student or recent graduate, a building owner or developer, a podcaster.
Yeah.
So why you should learn structural engineering? Here's maybe we're getting the juice. So structural engineering is a vital skill for anyone involved in construction, no matter if you're a professional investor, building owner. It's what adds bones and muscles to buildings, right? So that's kind of a little bit of like what we're even talking about, right? Keeps them from collapsing, right? And makes them safe to use. More importantly, it builds solutions for real-world problems that won't go away regardless of how much we advance or our technology and science. Another huge part of this, right, is like we have not invented better. I mean, we've invented better concrete, but we haven't been like replace all concrete with this other substance called fucking coolcrete, right?
Coolcrete.
Coolcrete.
That's the greatest new product.
I know it's a great new product, but
I also wouldn't recommend it for buildings because it seems shady.
It does seem super shady.
So we're still using the same shit. We're still using rebar. We're still using concrete. We're still using like 4x4s and 4x8s and fucking wood paneling and load bearing beams and all that kind of shit. So if you build it right, it's supposed to stay up, right?
Yeah.
That's the idea, That's not only makes structural engineering an unavoidable part of every construction process, but also the most in-demand money-making skills of the future. Hey,
I'm getting into it.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's built by normal engineers. Maybe it's a scam, but you should give them your money and start. Anyway, okay, so back to the sub. So where do we leave off?
So there's this one, I can't get on Reddit at all right now because of something, but I've got I just texted you guys. This is the post that kind of caught my attention, and I know there's a ton of interesting stuff about structural engineering, but given what happened in Miami, I think this is one of the more interesting current event ones. It's one of the structural engineers who frequents the subreddit took the 2018 inspection report from the building, which is something you've probably heard about on the news lately, about this big inspection report that people came in 2018 and detailed all the things that weren't up to code or the damage that they were observing, and went through, highlighted some key points that they noted, and then opened up the discussion in the comments to see what people thought about it. So I don't know about you guys, but as someone who doesn't know much about structural engineering, I wanted to kind of see what people were saying about that report, because on the news, everyone's like, hey, only 4 years ago, there was this big inspection. They found a ton of stuff that wasn't up to code or wasn't working properly or was very damaged and causing issues. Like, this could be why the collapse happened. So reading through it as a lay person, you kind of are like, God, this does sound terrible. So if we look at this, they kind of underline some of the most important stuff. So we can kind of maybe go through the report a little bit. But first, maybe just a recap of what exactly happened with the Surfside condo collapse.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Where, how many units?
So basically on June 24th, around 1:20 in the morning, while most residents were asleep, the condo tower shook and partially collapsed, destroying about 55 apartment units. So people, rescue crews raced to the scene, began going over all of the wreckage, trying to find survivors. One person, Susanna Alvarez, who's 62, she was on the 10th floor when she started to feel the entire building shaking. And we in California and in places where earthquakes are common, maybe would feel this and instantly think, earthquake, But in Miami, I don't think they've got earthquakes. They've got fucking monsoons and hurricanes and shit. But this was happening. She wakes up and she's like, I felt like I was on a ride. The bed was shaking. The balcony doors flew open. It was like the longest thunderclap she'd ever heard in her life. So later that day, Governor Ron DeSantis declared a state of emergency in Miami-Dade County. Biden approved an emergency declaration for Florida, allowing the FEMA to give federal resources to the scene.
Wake up, Joe. Wake up, Joe. There's a building.
Huh? And then Joe. So this is terrifying. So basically that's kind of what happened. There was like a loud boom noise. They thought maybe another resident in unit 111, which I'm assuming is the ground floor or the first floor, heard this loud boom, thought the garage was collapsing, ran outside. Moments later, part of the building just completely collapsed. There was one man who was on a call with his wife around that time, and she just started screaming that the pool was sinking. This is like terrifying sounding. She's on the phone with her husband. She's at the condominium. I don't think she survived. And she just starts screaming, honey, the pool's caving in. The pool's sinking into the ground. Everything's shaking. Everything's shaking. Then she screams, the line goes dead. Oh. So it's like, this is like terrifying, like really scary. Anytime a building collapses or anytime anybody's like caught in this like fucking rub, it's terrifying. But this all goes down. Everybody's like, why the fuck did this happen? Like,
and at what time? Like middle of the night, like 2 a.m. or something?
Yeah, like 1:20, 1:30 in the morning. And apparently, according to some of these, according to the report from what the collapse itself, it took about 2 minutes between the collapse and the boom noise to the collapse, which when you think about like counting out the seconds in 2 minutes, that feels like a lot of time. Like when I'm thinking, I'm like, I feel a boom. Could I get out in front of my apartment in 2 minutes? Yeah, fuck yeah, I could. But when you talk to the structural engineers and the rescue teams, they're like, in terms of buildings, 2 minutes is an instant. Like that is so fast. So it may seem like you have a lot of time, but you have to think like no one knows what the fuck's going on. They hear a boom. You're not grabbing your bags and running. You're like, what just happened? What just happened? I mean,
probably, and if it's in the middle of the night, I mean, I don't know how you guys are. I mean, this always happens with earthquakes, right? It's like earthquake happens, you're not just like, fuck, get in the door frame.
Yeah.
Go check yourself. I'm just like,
go. I'm like,
it's over. I'm going back to bed. Right?
Yes.
So like you feel something, you go like, what was that? Whatever. You know?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
So yeah, no one's like up and rushing out. I mean, you're kind of just like
you have to account for that like, reaction time,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's generally what happened. So we're in the stage now of what the fuck happened? Why did it collapse? Will more buildings around Miami collapse? Like, is it something about this building? Is it something about, global warming and Miami sinking? Is it, poor craftsmanship or poor engineering?
Only half the building collapsed, which is another interesting element, right? Why didn't the whole building collapse? Why did only half of it collapse? I'm sure the rest of the people on the half that didn't collapse are out of there immediately. Yeah, and then there's like a sister building up the road that's the same building, I guess, and they're probably
like
going, well, we're out of here too. And then that whole area is condos that are basically the same sort of structure built around the same time, right? So
yeah,
theoretically,
also probably built by the same contractor.
Probably,
Yeah.
So I would imagine everybody in that area, and I was looking at Miami, like the island that it's on. Like I don't spend a lot of time in Miami, not as much as I do in Singapore, but it's on this like reef, like this barrier reef island outside of the mainland, right? And so it's basically like, I was reading that those islands, historically shift all the time. So as ocean patterns change, those things move around. Based on, it's like a sandbar kind of thing. It's not really like a great place. So as ocean levels rise, the water table goes up, and
build buildings there. Like
insane, right? So like all these buildings are built on pylons, which are basically these long, consider them long straws of concrete built. Long straws of cocaine built into the cocaine. Woo, Miami. Yeah. Long straws of concrete built down to the ground. And the higher the building, the longer they have to go down.
Okay.
And so they have, they eventually typically they hit something called bedrock or like hard rock. And that's kind of where you want to fix your pilings to. And depending on the height of the building, your depth has to match the height. There's like a ratio of that.
Okay.
And so as your pilings are going down, they should theoretically be dry because water, and especially salt water, can erode the material that's keeping them structurally sound. And so as the water level rises in that area, the water table also rises. So like the pilings that are in the ground could be halfway submerged now when they didn't start that way. Wow. So that's like a what if factor that whole region that I was reading about has to think about. And you're like, holy shit. There's like a million of these buildings that could be on a foundation that was structurally sound in 1990, but in 2030, it's not at all. And so what do you do? Do you just believe them? Like, it's only going to get worse. And it's like, this could be the first of a series of buildings that are on this unstable footing that could start falling over in that area. Really crazy.
Well,
really scary.
We are talking about like apartment buildings. I mean, the other two. So my thought throughout this whole process has been, I think two resonant things have been kind of like getting my attention. One being, these are buildings. Like, I think the last time I remember something this tragic that kind of had a similar feeling was the like London apartment fire that happened a few years ago. Do you guys remember that? And it was a similar thing. I think there was like an electricity issue or something, but that one was like poor income, like high rise, kind of essentially a council flat type thing. And it was a big conversation around class, because it was like, if these people weren't poor, you would have fucking fixed this shit, right?
No kidding.
And this one is kind of, it doesn't fly in the face of that theory, because that theory is 100% true. But this one, like, these are $1 million condos. Like, these are not cheap. Like, these are not like, we're gonna put people that we don't care about in them, which obviously we know happens sometimes with these kind of issues. I mean, devastatingly, obviously we would not support that kind of thing.
No.
But it was interesting because this feels like it is solely a byproduct of infrastructural collapse, not a like triage, like the government's only going to pay attention to the people who can pay for it type thing.
Right.
And then the other thing is, like, so I'm from the Appalachian region, West Virginia, Ohio. I'm from right up this, basically 30 minutes from the Mothman area. Point Pleasant, West Virginia is where I grew up. And so famously massive bridge collapse there, right? And so I talk about bridges a lot too, because that's another big conversation. Like, when we talk about infrastructural reform and fixing all these things, one of the things people always point to are bridges, because bridges are just like always
exposed steel.
Exposed steel.
And the amount it was built to hold when it was built versus the amount of weight that exists now.
Totally. So this is a residential apartment that we saw collapse. A lot of death, a lot of destruction. This is not, hopefully, obviously this is a reminder to everybody, but this is also like apartments. Like, we had this issue with earthquakes too. I mean, this is actually kind of a good version of this, right? Which is when the earthquake, when a big earthquake happened. I think it was, I don't remember which earthquake, but huge earthquake in LA, and all of a sudden
89.
Or,
sorry, 94.
94. The
Northridge quake.
But after that, people were just like, you know what? This is some fucking bullshit. We got to fix our buildings, right?
Yeah.
And so now most of the buildings are like on rollers and shit.
Right.
So that if an earthquake happens, you just kind of like
bumper cars
roll around a little bit, and you don't like, you're not having the same issue that would happen if you're just like strict beams. An earthquake happens, just like, now it's just like, whoa, right?
Yeah. Now it's just like a roller skating waitress who slipped on a banana peel.
That's exactly what
classic.
But
classic.
that is
it's a terminology in structural engineering.
That is, yeah. That is at its best, right? Like, that is kind of the point of this, is like, now hopefully people are going to be like, 50 years ago we fucked up. Now we have to fix it to accommodate this reality of our world, right?
Yeah.
How are we going to do that, right? So anyway, continue, dog. We should probably talk about the report.
Yeah, let's get into the report. So basically, in October of 2018, there was a structural engineering report on these towers, the Champlain Towers South condo in Surfside, and detailed a bunch of problems with the building, including major structural damage to the concrete slab below the pool deck. And it recommends extensive repairs in the near future. It's a 9-page report. It notes structural concrete slab being flat rather than sloped, which is something I think Freed even mentioned, like about pitched roof versus flat roof. It's like it can cause pooling of water if there's water. So there's the structural concrete slab being flat, so water can't drain off of it. It pools until it evaporates instead of being able to drain off, which causes a lot of damage to the concrete and stuff. They found abundant cracking in the concrete beams in the parking garage, suggesting previous attempts to repair that damage was failed. There was a failure to complete all of these recommended repairs, which the report warned would cause the extent of the concrete deterioration to expand exponentially. So a lot of really like serious sounding stuff in this report. And the Miami-Dade County mayor didn't even know about it. They were like, well, yeah, the report was likely not read at the time. The town had it on file, but there's nothing, we didn't know about it. So it seems like from someone on the outside, this is like, okay, the owner of the building or something probably got this report and then didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Right.
So you read through this, like some of the things the person outlined, which you can see if you're watching live right now, but if you're listening, some of the things that they noticed when they went in 2018 was that on the balconies, with every one of the units, not all of them, but on a lot of the balconies, there was like tile that they added on top of the balcony, like concrete, which did a couple things. It wasn't waterproofed. So there were tons of cracks and stuff, which means there was probably structural damage to the concrete slab underneath the balcony. And it also meant that the like distance between the top railing and the bottom was no longer like up to code because the tile made it shorter by like adding an extra couple inches on top. So like that wasn't okay. Then you look down further on this first page of the report and there's spalling, which is basically, we made a little document for ourselves so we know what some of the stuff means. But spalling is the breakaway of concrete surfaces, which extends to the top layers of reinforcing steel. So that usually happens if you see spalling, like chunks of concrete falling off, like what you can see if you're watching right now, that there's water damage. Like that means there's water in the concrete and there's nowhere for it to like properly drain out.
Right. And this could also, so just so I understand it correctly, so spalling also could imply other things, but in this case, because we're in Miami, water damage is the thing that's doing it. But spalling could also be caused by like poor concrete. Like concrete that was poured incorrectly and it just like it's broken away for different reasons. Concrete that like maybe the water, like the so I don't know what I'm talking about, but like so
I guess it's like just a term for like the damage that you can.
And Dom, you would know this. Like when you're doing concrete, it's water. It's like essentially like a diluted water mixture, right? You have to like add water to the concrete, right?
Yeah. The concrete is a mixture of rocks and sand, and then there's chemicals, lye, and when they call it curing. When it cures, there's a chemical process that hardens it all together and makes it like a unit. And the rebar, is kind of the genius part of it all. Without rebar, concrete's pretty brittle. You can basically smash it like a hammer, like a rock with a hammer. Concrete's essentially rock without rebar. You can just hit it and it'll chunk off.
It'll just break up.
But with the rebar, when it cures, it makes it all one piece essentially. That's almost impossible to break up. Like breaking up concrete and rebar is like, it's like a real really task.
Hard. It's interesting. And for anyone listening who doesn't know what that is, rebar just is reinforcing bar, which is like those little metal bars that you see like people pouring concrete over. It's like the interior like structure of the concrete slabs. And I was reading that like the whole point is, like you said, if you took like a sledgehammer and hit the side of concrete slab with rebar in it, it's like the rebar keeps the separated pieces from further separating. So it's like, there could be cracks, but it's not going to be like dangerous cracks if you have the rebar correctly placed.
And the same physics applies in like, like tile work, for instance. If you're doing backsplashes in your house, you use like, they used to use like a chicken wire in the like the wall concrete. It's called thinset. Like chicken wire is the same thing. So like what it does is like it unifies the dried rock into one unit. And they do it on surfboards too with fiberglass. Like the fiberglass like fabric, essentially it's like a fabric when it's dry. When they wrap the board in it and they put the resin on it, when it dries, it all becomes one piece and becomes like, 100 times stronger, maybe 1,000 times stronger than if it was just fiberglass without the. So it's a very common sort of engineering, tool that's used across all kinds of building. And they do it like Kevlar. That's what Kevlar is. It's essentially like this woven fabric together. And when it's stressed in a way, like when a bullet hits it, it actually gets stronger. It like tightens. And so it's it's kind of this like simple, ingenious technology that's
like a Chinese finger trap.
It's a Chinese finger trap. It's exactly what it is. The more you pull, the stronger it gets. Yeah.
I had a panic attack one time in a Chinese finger trap when I was like 8. I couldn't get it off.
On brand.
It was very scary.
Right
yeah. Okay, so yeah, a few more things that they pointed out is underneath the balconies, which these are called soffits, which I didn't know. Like if you notice, like like your roof will extend over the walls of your home. Like that's a normal thing. And the underside of that overhang can be called a few different things, but it's called a soffit too. And so they refer to the underneath of the balconies, which you can see in this image, as soffits as well. And basically paint spalling, big bubbles of like water filled paint were like kind of like popping up at the bottom of these soffits. So
So that's a tell
what you're seeing is water damage, like a ton of water damage, right?
You're seeing water traveling through the interior of the concrete where it should not penetrate the concrete at all.
Damn.
And once you have a river of water going through concrete, you're essentially creating it starts as a tier, then a creek, and then a river, and then love. You know what I mean?
And then love.
So, and this is, one like very visual way to think about all this is you guys have all seen pictures of Half Dome. You know what Half Dome is. Half Dome was a round mountain. In the top, there was a small crack. Water would consistently go in it. It would freeze in the winter, expand, freeze, expand, freeze, expand. And that went on for thousands of years until one day, one half of the mountain just went, it wasn't attached to the other half anymore. And it went like this, wobonk, and it fell off.
Yeah.
And so the rest, you have the sheer mountain face. And that's why Half Dome's so impressive looking. But it's the exact same logic that happened here. You get water in the middle of this crack and it just keeps, year after year, keeps expanding, keeps weakening.
That's such a great connection to make. Like we're hearing like from these reports and from all these engineers, like water is the most damaging substance to like concrete and rock and all this stuff. And it's like, duh, look at all of our look at the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah, you ever go hiking, you idiots, dude? Get out of the newsroom and take a hike.
Take a fucking hike. Go kick rocks.
Take a hike.
Go kick rocks. Suck my eggs,
Suck my eggs.
Suck my eggs. So right. I mean, really, we can continue going through. There are a few other things that are in this report, like in the garage, there was cracking and spalling in the parking garage columns. There were exposed rebar at the top side of the garage deck. You can tell from this one picture. Let me see if I can share it now that my Reddit's working. This one picture shows it looks like it's the top side of the garage deck, but it's like a fucking mess. And basically what they said is the installed epoxy is not continuous as observed from the bottom of the slab. Evidence of poor workmanship performed by the previous contractor. The injection ports were not removed and the surfaces were not ground smooth at the completion of injection. I don't know what injection ports are, but I'm sure it has something to do with like spreading it all evenly.
Yeah, it looks like it's a mixture of like two, it looks like two kinds of glue and it's an epoxy. And you remember in Die Hard 3 when they had those two epoxy things to make the bomb to make an explosion? But it's like the same thing. They have these two sides and you depress it with this, like, it looks like a hospital depressor, like a needle, and you inject it into these cracks in the concrete. And what it does is it goes in and it fills all this dead space. And then when it dries, it's essentially rock fucking hard concrete. Wow. And so it's a way to fix concrete that's got these cracks. So theoretically, you're blocking the pores that water would leak through. And so you would go around a building and address these cracks and say, okay, this is where water is like creating more damage. And you fill them. You fill them out. And then the top of it, you'd have to also put like a coat on so the water couldn't get in even more, right? Because water's always going to keep trying. It's relentless.
It's relentless.
And so, what they're saying here is like maybe the crack tops weren't smoothed out enough where like water was still able to get in, right? It looked like it was sort of temporary. Maybe this worked for a little while, but wasn't done well enough where it kept working.
Yeah, totally. I mean, God, that's really freaky. And I'm really glad you've you've renovated a house, because this is all really helpful context.
I was very, you know, it was my first house. I was like, you know, pretty into like looking at, and you get all these inspectors and stuff, and they come and they, you know, they check out all they tell you what's potentially wrong with your house so you can fix it or negotiate against the price or whatever. And you look at the foundation. That's the big thing. And I crawled around under the house, and you look at the footings, and you see, okay, I can clearly see there's damage here, and X, Y, Z could need to be done. And, you know, it's like relatively simple stuff that if you're interested in it, it's very easy to learn. You just have to start care. And when you just put all your money into somebody's, into this house, you're like, I care now all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Because I don't want it to fall over.
Damn.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Well, basically what you're seeing too, in the rest of this report is more of that same stuff. So a lot of damage, a lot of recommendations that, listen, if you're going to correctly fix all this shit, it's going to cost, I think somebody, I don't know if this was in the report necessarily, or if somebody in this, the person who posted this had estimated this himself or herself, but the opinion was that it would be like a $3.3 million repair. So that's a pretty big repair. So apparently didn't happen or wasn't done correctly. But this is the interesting part, I think. You look down at the comments from fellow structural engineers, people who have like a little flair on their name that says PE/SE. And I looked it up. PE means professional engineer, SE structural engineer, just their name, their like titles. So these people are like, this is really helpful. Thanks for, you know, outlining this and like adding your notes. But from what they can tell is that a lot of the points and the areas in this report are parts of the building that didn't collapse, such as the pool deck and the, what was the one at the pool deck, the garage. They seem to have survived the collapse intact. So this person, the mighty engineer says, I concur. The report and the defects indicated don't appear to be substantially related to the collapse. So as someone watching this, as someone who loves Kathy and Hoda, they're fucking going off on this report. Okay. Everybody has, you know, blood in their eyes, and they're like, this fucking report came out 4 years ago. All this shit, you know, should have been fixed and this wouldn't have happened. And what seems to be the consensus in a lot of the comments is that, listen, the report, yes, had a lot of things, you know, they pointed out, but this is probably what a report for any 40-year-old building is going to look like. Like,
and what that leads me to believe is, because you're right, like all these buildings, especially in these wet environments like Florida, have this sort of like water damage. Right. There's such a thing as bad concrete, which I don't know how.
Earlier, it's like what, like if you dilute the concrete with too much water, for instance, you're probably going to make looser,
like ruin its
right?
No, it's not. It's not on the contractor's end. It's on the manufacturer of the concrete end. So it's a poor mixture, not your mixture on the job site. It's the mixture that you bought it in. So it has to be like X parts, this, and this. So when water's added, it cures correctly. Yeah. Now, you know, obviously you have to add enough water, but that's really not what it means. So the manufacturing side of the concrete has to be sound. And so this is like Russia obviously is like famous for making shitty concrete because they just cut corners and like, it was like, you know, communistic thing. And they would like put garbage inside the concrete instead of like what they were supposed to put in. So they would fill it with junk. And so then over time, like there'd be these air pockets that wouldn't cure correctly. And then those get filled with whatever. And then it becomes like brittle and porous and falls apart. And so this could be, we don't know yet, but this feels like it also could be bad concrete. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fucking scary. Because in that situation, if you don't know like the fucking chemical makeup of the powdered concrete you're getting, like what are you supposed to do? All you can do is trust that it's
just trust. Yeah.
Yeah.
This goes to the this goes to the local. So there's the top of all time on the structural engineering subreddit is a meme that a structural engineer posted in their office that has, it's like the classic meme that's like you see it's like three assassins, and then the bottom panel is like a fourth assassin. So it's the person who's just observing is a structural engineer. Then the assassin directly behind them is the architect with a gun against the structural engineer's head. Then directly behind the architect is the client, a gun against the client's head. And then looking over all of them with a sniper rifle is local government, right? And so what I read into this as a non-structural engineer is structural engineers in their minds are the shit end of the stick. They're trying to do the best they can.
Do it right.
The architect is like, no, you got to cut this corner.
Make it pretty.
The structural engineer is like, but we need more help. And then the client is telling the architect, no, I don't have enough money. And the architect's like, you need to do this right. And then the local government is where you kind of get into the big issues with like zoning laws, with like anything where you have to like pull papers for permits and all that kind of shit. And they're either saying you need to do this and that is wrong, but we're telling you to do it anyway, or they're saying some other version of whatever the oversight is a byproduct of misinformed, potentially corrupt local government, right?
Damn.
And then directly below this, which is also kind of interesting, is like this is a thought of this when I was emailing an architect, right? And it's the classic Bernie Sanders, I'm once again asking you for support. And it says, I'm once again asking you for an additional column support. So that also tells me
and they're like, no, that fucks with my open floor plan.
Right.
No.
And so the structural engineers are saying, like, in order to make this the safest, best quality thing possible, we need better support, higher quality concrete, more like we need 10 diameters or 10 millimeters diameter fucking whatever instead of 5, you know, like it's all these things that people are just cutting corners to save money to like for like what you just said, ideas, right?
Totally.
So this is you're pulling up as well, Dog. What is this?
So this is like, I think does a really good job in a cartoon of kind of explaining, similarly to the meme you showed, explaining the role of everybody in like the building process. So it shows a tree swing, Right. So the first one is just a normal looking tree swing. It's what the developer wanted. Then it shows what the architect designed, and it's a tree swing, but each rope is tied to a different branch. It looks really cool.
Well, it's also impractical. You can't actually swing.
And it would never work. Yeah. Like, how would you swing? You would hit the back of the tree. What the quantity surveyor priced, and it's a tree swing, but the ropes are about 6 inches long.
Hey, cutting cost. Literally cutting cost. Cutting ropes.
What the structural engineer recommended is a tree swing with a center rope so that it's very safe. What the letting agent advertised is a double-decker tree swing. So that's pretty funny too. What the planning officer preferred. This I don't understand what a planning officer does, but it looks like a unicycle tree swing with just a small one rope and like a little chunk of wood at the bottom.
Another cost-cutting measure.
Cost-cutting guy.
Saying, like, we don't need two. If we don't need 2 ropes, we actually can do it with 1 rope where we put.
Someone could sit on that.
Shorten the thing, and we could put it in the middle.
Yeah.
Right.
It makes sense.
That might be an environmental encroachment note. Like, we don't want your swings too big. Make it smaller. Like.
Oh, I see what you mean. That makes sense. It's like, you can't take up that much space. We'll give you a permit for this much space.
Yeah, who the hell do you think you are? You only get 1 rope.
Right.
So then it's what the health and safety officer required, and it's a tree swing that's literally on the ground. The ropes are so long that you aren't even floating in the air. Then you've got what the fire officer demanded, and the tree's just been cut down.
That's accurate. Yeah. No, and then concerts are a fire hazard. No concerts.
Jesus Christ. And then we have the one that I think is funny, and
we're dealing with this shit right now.
Yeah,
right?
What the builder built. And it's just a shitty tree swing that is 1 rope long, 1 rope short. You wouldn't even be able to really sit on it without falling. Right. And that's what you get out of all of the planning. All of like the entire committee gets together and like sketches what they want, and this is the ultimate what you're gonna get. So this is like interesting
because this is in conjunction with this other meme I found, which is it's the kind of traditional like woman yelling from like Desperate Housewives or some other fucking bullshit show, and the cat sitting eating a salad, right? Have you seen this a million times, right? And it's just architects who blame the structural engineer for making their building look dull is the woman screaming. And then the cat, the structural engineer who tries to explain the building that based on the design, the building would have collapsed. Right? So there is just like this constant fight between the different roles that people play in the building process. And I think that this is, what's interesting about this as it pertains to the Miami thing is like it does in a way like the structural engineers just get to say, I told you so. Right? Like that's like all of what they do, all of what they try to do is about safety and about suggesting safety endeavor. And for me, this feels like the structural engineer is not at fault for this. And all they can do is go, if you would have done this, like we suggested, it would not have happened. Right.
Right.
And then instead the builder maybe used poor quality, the building, the actual investor was cutting costs.
Yeah.
The architect, it doesn't seem like this is an architectural problem. I'm not seeing anything here that I'm just like, wow, like can't believe you didn't put a fucking beam in the middle of the ballroom. Like how can you get away with that, right? Like I for me, this feels more like quality and cutting costs by not upkeep.
Like the execution wasn't.
Yeah, this is an executional thing, right? I mean, maybe like I don't know if we looked closer as like idiots who don't know anything about this stuff, like maybe we could look at it and be like, oh, well, how is the building supposed to stay up like that? There's only like every once in a while you'll see a building that you're just like, wow, that looks cool, but like that doesn't. How is it? Huh?
Like, would I go in it? No.
Like that giant skyscraper in LA that just like the whole time it angles out.
Yeah.
And you're just like, you're like, wait, I don't understand how.
That's called a cantilever.
Ooh.
And you look at it and you're just like, I don't understand how it stays up, right? And then
there's like an equation for that. Like for every foot it goes out, it has to go back 2 feet. Into the structure. So if you go out 30 feet, you got to go back 90 feet. Right. I think that's like the thing. So but yeah, so this building's on pylons, which are essentially, like I said, Coke straws going down into the sand. This is a cool video.
So let me just quickly mention this video. So that we're watching this is actually for anybody who knows fucking nothing about all this stuff. Like the structural engineering subreddit is actually fucking sick because you do have a little bit of like, wow, interesting way to think about it. But this is a Japanese structural engineer showing essentially the byproduct of a tsunami is right. It's like simulating a tsunami.
Yeah. And how it affects like different foundations.
And how it affects different foundations. So this one is the I'm gonna say liquefaction experiment.
Liquefaction.
Liquefaction.
Yeah, nice. that was in my house report. We're in a liquefaction zone because we're close enough. We're basically in like a marine table, which anybody on the west side of Los Angeles is in, but we're specifically close to one. So one of the look, Yell Twin works in a construction office.
Works in construction. Love to hear it.
We got to get you on. Come on.
You learned, dude.
But this is when the water mixes with the dry dirt and it turns to quicksand, essentially.
Oh, dude, look how fun it looks. I mean, not if you were really there, but like it does look like the kind of stuff you'd stick your finger. You'd like have fun sticking your finger.
Look at those cute Japanese apartments. Is what I'm seeing.
I know.
Love it. Really but it is really interesting because it starts out showing there are 3 different models, right? So the first one uses like rebar essentially, right? It's like it has.
Are those the pylons?
That's a footing. That's a footing foundation. Well, there's a slab, a footing, and a pylon. So that's 3 from left to right. Yeah.
Right, and then the middle one is just kind of like it kind of is sitting on. There's nothing that.
It's called the slab.
A slab. Yeah, so it's just sitting on top. And then
one giant concrete plate, basically. Yeah. The last one's a footing. That's what we are on in LA, mostly footings.
Okay.
Well,
it's like a concrete perimeter that's like the exterior walls of your house.
Oh, okay.
And so we see that the footing basically just goes under immediately. The one with the concrete middle one does pretty well. It seems like it's going to float away potentially. And then the one with the pylons is like, we ain't going nowhere, son.
Yeah,
like,
sorry.
Around, right?
And the interesting thing too is they bury a ping pong ball in it, in the sand, to kind of show what happens in these situations to hollow objects like water pipes. They'll resurface during this like movement.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
That's a really fun little experiment.
Ultimately, like, it seems like what people are saying about the Miami collapse is that this report is really not as damning as it seems to people who are not in this business, that the report itself is probably something you'd see in a lot of buildings of a similar age, and that it's going to take a lot longer than a few weeks to figure out what happened with that building. It's going to take a long time, and ultimately it's not going to be from one or two of these issues. It's probably going to be a combination of like 4 or 5 of these issues that ultimately made it collapse, which is good to know because Kathy and Hoda are going to try to get us all worked up about it. And now you guys know, like, don't get worked up about the report. Yes, these things should have been fixed, but it's by no means the definitive reason why this building collapsed.
Well, the definitive reason was because there were Jeffrey Epstein files that were hidden on the 15th
Thank
floor.
you. It's true. Thank you.
So
Hillary Clinton's behind this whole thing. I'm pretty sure.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. Lock her up. You know what I'm saying?
Lock her up. Hey, I don't know if you guys know about this building in San Francisco called the Millennium Tower. That's a 58-story building that was built in like 2015. But it's been sinking. It's sunk already. This is pretty brand new. It's like this new fancy building that everyone's been talking. I'm from San Francisco originally, so everyone's been talking about for years. It's sunk 16 inches on one side because they didn't do the foundation correctly. And so it's become this whole fucking thing. So they sold all these fancy ass, downtown San Francisco, like, chic apartment. Joe Montana owned one. Wow. All the coolest people in the city owned one. And then it started sinking. And you could literally like put a marble in your apartment and it would like go. And of course, it's this massive building in this area that's known for earthquakes and it's near the water. And it's like, well, this doesn't look good for the future. So they've been trying to figure out, everyone's suing everybody right now. And it's this massive like legal problem and everyone's trying to get out of their contracts and blah, 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 blah. Now, what do you do with the building? So they're trying to reinforce the foundation and jack it up. But it's kind of like a bigger version of this before it happens. Nothing's fallen yet. But if this thing fell, it would hit God knows how many other buildings. It's so big. Yeah. And I guess the problem is they didn't drill down deep enough into the bedrock to hit solid ground. And this part of San Francisco is landfill. And so it's, there are some cases like this around the country that people are keeping their eye on. And this is like, maybe the Miami case will kick this into higher gear where people are like, hey, man, can't be having a building fall over.
Wow.
Well, that's kind of my big thought about this is like, what is really going to happen with the way that we think of these things in general? Because, I mean, we always hear about, like, we heard this with Trump. Now we're hearing it with Biden about the big infrastructure plan, right? The big infrastructure plan. And a lot of that, I think that has to do in some capacity with like fixing our roads, all these things that we know do structural damage to cars and the transportation system. There's so many implications of poor infrastructure. And a lot of that infrastructure plan has to do, of course, with government funded infrastructure. So roads, bridges, fucking all that bullshit, right? But we are seeing the same thing with private buildings, right? Because there is a bunch of infrastructural issues. We know that like if there is money involved in the way that people are getting sued right now, that like the fucking ripples of what happened in Miami are going to last for a while. That it's going to be really interesting to see all of the byproducts of infrastructure regulation change, because you also start getting into that weird world after this where like a place like Miami where you have a lot of like rich money coming in building stuff, where the city's building up because maybe the reason that the city's building up is because they are loose on local government contracts. So you have all these builders coming in and being like, fuck, we'll just build some shit in Miami. It's an easy way to like put our money down and make some fucking cash. Who gives a shit? All of a sudden, those people are going to be like, fuck that. We're going to fucking, Malaysia, where they have really loose shit. So we're just going to start putting our money in fucking Malaysia and building there. So it might actually change a little bit of the fabric of what is being built at what speed, the idea of development in a place like Miami. So, I mean, it's a little bit of the way that tax codes work, right? It's like everybody's moving to Texas because they don't have income tax, right? And then like, if people were moving to Miami because they don't have like building codes, this is a hypothetical, but it seems like this is how this shit works, right? It's like because they don't have the same building codes, everybody's building up in a place like Miami. Well, if all of a sudden they rightfully have to introduce new building codes because people are fucking dying from collapsed structures, all of a sudden you might see new weird developments happening in fucking Boca Raton or fucking Missouri or Austin or like I said, like Malaysia or fucking Dubai or something.
Like humankind is all about that short-term profit over like long-term anything.
Yeah, I know. And so it's going to be interesting to see the ripples, man. Our hearts go out to anybody who lost somebody in it, who is really, really affected by it. We also, another thing that was kind of swept under the rug, there were crazy floods in Detroit. So all my Detroit friends are dealing with some crazy issues right now.
What?
Well, which is another weird thing. It's another potential. I don't know enough about that one, but it's another potentially big infrastructure issue because I think it might have been like it wasn't like a sewer thing, but I do think it was like the pipes got over flooded, right?
Wow.
From gnarly rain. So,
dude.
So, it's another one of those things where like infrastructural collapse is really expensive and devastating.
Yeah.
It's really fucking devastating, right? And
it so is. And like in this case, there's still up to 145 people still missing.
Totally.
In the rubble. So like you said, like our hearts go out to the people who lost their lives, to the families who are still waiting to hear what happened to their loved ones, the people recovering in hospitals right now. Like it's terrifying. And the number of people missing has been unchanged since yesterday, maybe even the day before. So the chances of a lot of these people coming out alive is diminishing.
Right.
I say, Sleepy Joe, why don't, while we're dropping a couple trill on, your buddies at the big banks, let's drop a couple trill and just hire everybody in America to rebuild all the stuff that needs rebuilding. I mean,
right? We need jobs.
Yeah. It's like, it's going to take 20 years. It's not that sexy. It's going to take 50 years, but get a fucking move on, dude.
Right.
People do it.
It is, in a way, it's actually extremely sexy, quite frankly. It's like a really good
the best
way
kind of sex.
50
years sex.
It's like the idea of somebody. I mean, this almost feels like wartime economics, right? Like when we were in war, in the World War II, it was like, we got jobs for everybody. We're going to fucking war. You want to build a fucking rocket launcher? Have at it, right? Like,
go for it.
You want to make food for the troops? Let's fucking go, right? And so I feel like everybody talks about infrastructure. I'm also looking at photos of like bridges fucked up. There's so many things that we see that we're just like, damn, that shit is fucking busted, man.
Wow.
And so I think that there is just we need to fix this stuff, and we need to pay people to do it, and we need people to be educated enough to do it, right?
But it's a better investment, I say. You're spreading it around to a million people versus putting all your trill at Amazon or whoever you just bailed out. I just, that money is an investment in the people of America. It's going to come back around. And we need to modernize everything. Let's do it.
We have to. I mean, and that's the big thing is like we have to modernize everything. We have to look at building codes and shit.
I want smart bridges. Okay, my smart refrigerator is perfect, bro. It's never ever had a glitch. I want to be able to
tweet from the bridge, dude.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
So I've realized, like, living in the smart house. Our house is not that smart, but like all the devices now have like smart implications. It's like managing a fleet of really stupid robots.
Yeah.
And like you're always on duty.
Responsible for a staff of robots now.
And they're always trying to talk to you, and they're so dumb at this point.
Yeah.
It's I don't want anything smart in our bridges. I want
no
engineering.
I'm with you. I was at my mom's for a while, and her Alexa kept piping up like,
Shut
I
up, Alexa.
noticed that you buy, fucking Vagisil, and do you want more? And I'm like, shut the fuck up, or I will unplug you for the rest of your existence. There's no reason to be fucking selling me things at 9 o'clock in the morning, Alexa. Shut up. Yes, I know there's a setting.
One of our cars, the second you turn the car off, the second the car goes off, the car says, your cell phone is still in the car. And it's like, I'm still in the fucking car.
I'm in the car.
I get it. I get you're trying to help, but shut the fuck
up.
Yeah, I was going to get
Robot.
Every time. Anyway,
well, I got to get bouncing.
Times. Yeah, we got to go get to our respective jobs not doing structural engineering.
Yeah.
But hope you guys learned some stuff. I mean, I learned some things.
I did too.
Ask your construction pals if any of what we said is true.
Yes.
And
have them listen and tell you how wrong we are.
Yeah, how wrong we are. So sum it all up. If you are interested in, I think everybody should be interested in structural engineering, but also everything that happened with Miami and anything in the future, structural engineering is a really interesting place to both kind of get in the mind of the way a structural engineer thinks, which is like the memes, etc., but also getting into the kind of the nitty gritty about really some of the important practices that go into structural engineering, what to look for, what to pay attention to. If you're really interested in this studying structural engineering, there's some great resources for doing so, starting with the subreddit. So have at it. Build a fucking bridge. Make it up to code. Don't make it look interesting. Just make it sturdy.
Yeah. Make it a box, okay?
Give me a box. Give me a
box with 80 columns inside.
Right? That's what I'm saying. We are a pro column pod here.
Yes. 100%.
Anti-aesthetic pro column.
Writing that down for our t-shirts, you guys.
And always look to nature if you need ideas for your next Sims home. The Honeycomb really nailed it with their structural. I mean, that thing is indestructible.
You are so fucking right about that.
Dog, I want a honeycomb style home, please. Thank you.
Coming right up.
Anyway, so this is Did You Reddit, a weekly podcast about structural engineering and Reddit. By way of the internet, by way of Reddit. The front page is about the internet, structural engineering, Reddit. My name is It's Your Dad.
I am Doggy Boobies.
I am My Free Day, aka My Free Brill Cosby.
Britnell Cosby.
Brittany, free Bill. We don't have to pick one or the other. We can free them both.
We can free everybody.
And free Brittany.
Yep, technically.
All right. See you next week. Bye.